Let's talk about something that a lot of podcasters, maybe especially new podcasters, but definitely not exclusively new podcasters, stumble on. And that is, how long should your episodes be? I think forever we're sort of drifting between these two ideas that we're not giving enough away and that we're giving too much away. And I want to be sort of once and for all definitively, it depends. We're going to talk about sort of 3 sample episode lengths, sort of ranges, and when they are the best fit. Most importantly, I'm going to give you one rule definitively you can always live with and live by when it comes to how long your podcast episodes should be. Let's get into it. Welcome to the More Profitable Podcast with Stacey Harris. I'm Stacey, and this is the spot to learn more about the strategies, tactics, and tools you need to build your more profitable podcast. My team and I work every day with podcasters like you to shift shows from frustrating time sucks to productive members of your sales team, because your show should be built to generate and convert leads. So let's get into it. It used to really surprise me how often this question came up of how long should a podcast episode be. And I think now, after years of doing this and years of producing shows for other people, I always come back to one thing. And so we're going to give you the one rule to live by right up front. In theory, you could end this episode right after this. Don't. But here's the thing I come back to again and again. I had just started my business. It was 2011, 2012 maybe. It might have been early 2012. No, it had to have been Q4 2011. Yeah. And I was at what was kind of my first big conference, and it was a WordPress conference in Chandler, Arizona. And there was somebody talking about blogging because again, it was 2011. And somebody asked how long a blog post should be. And the person who was speaking said exactly as long as it needs to be to make your point. Not longer, not shorter. And that is something I have parroted to clients for the last 15 years. It is something I tell myself regularly. And it really is the one sort of always true answer to this question. It needs to be as long as it needs to be for the episode to deliver on the promise, to deliver on the purpose, to do its mother loving job. That's how long a podcast episode should be. Not longer and not shorter. However, that answer is not soup's helpful, right? It's not really giving us a length of time. And so it can still kind of end up in this muddiness of well, what is enough? And that's what I want to talk about today. So instead of having sort of 3 points for you like I normally do, we're going to talk about 3 different time ranges. We're going to talk about some episode types and topics that absolutely make sense to be 10 minutes or less. We're going to talk about some episodes that need to sit more in that 15 to 30-minute range. And then we're going to talk about examples of episodes that make absolute sense to be 45 plus minutes. We're also going to talk about the pros and cons of each of these lengths of times as far as the trade-offs. Before we jump in, I do want to let you know we have a couple spots left through, frankly, at this point, the end of the year for Profitable Podcast Launch Accelerator. If getting your podcast launched is on your to-do list, but it is not yet to done, let's to do it together. I was fun. I liked that one. I'm proud of that one. Let's get it done together. I'm really, really, really loving this container. We've had some really incredible podcasts launch over the last year and a half that we've been running this program. It's really found its shape and its form, and it's firmly out of beta testing and running now, and I'm stoked. The thing I'm maybe most excited about is because we are actually doing this work together, because the production is handled, these shows are not only getting launched, but they're continuing to run past the first season. Every single production client that we have had launch with us has moved into ongoing production with us because their shows are working. And because they can stay in that role of creator and host and don't have to worry about all of the planning and the production, because the planning we do together and the production we handle for them. If that sounds appealing, let's have a conversation. Uncommonlymore.com is the spot where you will find all of the information you need about both the Launch Accelerator and ongoing podcast production services if maybe your show is already launched. But again, spaces are limited as we roll through now firmly the second half of this year. So if you want to have a conversation and see when the timing might be right, either for the back half of this year or the first half of next year, because we are in fact booking for that too, head on over, uncommonlymore.com, and I can't wait to chat with you. All right, setting that aside, let's dig in to some episode links. I want to start with shorts, right? 10 minutes or less episodes. I have had people be like, I could never do episodes that short. It makes no sense. It actually can make a lot of sense. There are times where a 10-minute episode is great. Here's the spoiler alert. This episode's not going to be particularly long because I'm coming in and I'm answering a very specific question. And when you're coming in and you're answering something very specific, which can be wildly helpful from a discoverability standpoint, both in depending on how well your podcast's set up, but SEO, even like AI search, when you come in and you answer a very specific question and you're very clear on who you're answering that question for, that's going to be 10 minutes of super value, not just for the listener, but for you. I love these little quickie 10-minute hits because you get in and you get out. And so if you have what I'm going to call sort of an FAQ episode, an episode that answers a question people ask all the time, great. Answer that specific question and let that be the whole episode. So I absolutely could have done a 10-minute version of this episode where I ended it at exactly as long as it needs to be to make the point. And I talked a little bit to support that. And then we put this away. That could have been all this episode was. Now, I wanted to take it a step further because I want to give you some examples of each of these kind of episode lengths because I think it helps make it more concrete. But this could have easily been a little 10-minute FAQ episode. I especially love these kinds of episodes for episodes you're building to ultimately live in email sequences. So, episodes about working with you, foundational sort of terms and concepts that you work through with your clients, but them having an understanding of what that is means you get to dig deeper into the work. So, I'm going to absolutely make up an example here. Stepping outside of my own business, my own stuff. Let's say you are a email marketing expert and you sell email marketing services. There are endless sort of niche terms that live in the email marketing space. One of the ones that I think could be a great one, which is super FAQ-y, is what does the open rate mean? And why do I care about it? What am I looking for? What's a good open rate versus a bad open rate? That could 100% be a 10-minute or less episode that lives in your welcome sequence that goes out after your opt-in. Talking about commonly asked email marketing questions. You could put a whole series of these together as like an email marketing 101, and it is 10-minute episodes. Stretching the 10-minute into the 15-minute a little for the sake of our example, this is what I do with the Podcast Housekeeping series. Those episodes are all less than 15 minutes long. That was built intentionally so that they could fit together and be consumed in under an hour so that you can take action. By the way, you're going to hear the Podcast Housekeeping series rerun again in the next couple of weeks. So if you've been wondering, oh, hey, it's time for me to do that again, it's a coming. August every year, babe. What I want you to take away from this is these are episodes that solve one problem, answer one question. That's where these 10-minute episodes really thrive. And honestly, more often than not, these become really solid SEO and email sequence kind of gold mines because They meet somebody where they're at when they're first starting to explore a conversation. And when they're first getting to know us or first meeting us, we may not have had enough trust or enough interest for them to want to sit and listen to us talk for 15, 20, 30, 45 minutes. But they can absolutely come in, get their answer, and bounce when we're talking about a 10-minute quick episode. These are gold mines when done right. The thing is, here, you got to stay focused. You got to stay on message. And you have to resist the urge to go and, 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 and keep tacking on more information. That's what, in this case, for me, moved this kind of episode that we're doing today from a 10-minute episode to we'll probably end around 20 minutes. Because I didn't want to just say the thing that everybody needs to know, which is that it needs to be as long as it needs to be to deliver on the promise of the episode, to make your point. No longer, no shorter. Instead, I wanted to give these examples and a little bit of these pros and cons of each of these sort of example episode lengths. And so know that what will get you away from a 10-minute episode in a hurry is the ands, is the other stuff. And so it's going to be a balance. It almost always is going to be a balance. Here's the thing that maybe I should have said earlier, and maybe nobody says enough, which is your podcast probably isn't going to have all episodes of the same length. Different episode lengths do different jobs. And that's why we're talking about these examples of different episode lengths. With that, let's get into our next one. 15 to 30 minutes is probably where I would default the most solo episodes category, because this is where most solo episodes should sit. This is probably the most common. It's where you see most of my episodes fall. The reason I like this is it allows us enough time to get into a topic in a meaningful way, but I stop talking before you stop listening, which is important. Solo episodes longer than 30 minutes are really hard unless there's a really good reason for it to be that long. Unless you're really getting into something where nuance and examples are super helpful. I want to see you being more in the 15 to 20 minute range for a solo episode, but up to 30 can absolutely happen. Again, nuance. When we're talking about something where nuance matters and we really want to address some of the questions that might shift somebody's perspective around something we're talking about, it kind of makes sense to hit 30 minutes. And on the flip side of that, like 30 minutes is a perfectly acceptable amount of time for you to do an episode with a guest as well. We have a couple of clients who have shows where we regularly feature guests because the way they leverage their podcast as a sales tool has more to do with their guests than it does their listeners. And we do our very, very best to keep their episodes under 30 minutes. The reason I like 30-minute episodes is really, really cliche. It comes down to knowing who your listeners are and when they're listening. When I start talking about an episode that is an hour and a half long, it's not going to fit in your run. That's not going to fit in you walking the dog. That's not going to fit into some of the moments where I know my best listeners, my most engaged listeners, my best right fit clients, that segment of my listenership is going to be. More often than not, me talking at you for an hour, not generally appealing to the people who work with me. Also, they don't want to talk for an hour. And so the idea that they might need to, which me doing episodes that are that long sort of make it feel like that's what you need to do, I don't want to do. I don't want to create that belief even. And so when we're talking about that 15 to 30 minute mark, I think this is where probably 90% of shows should be living. Now, when I say 90% of shows, I should put a little asterisk next to that and say the kinds of shows we produce, which is solo hosted and often without a guest. One voice for 30 plus minutes is a lot. There's a reason when we go and we watch somebody speak on stage, even if they've got an hour talk, generally there is a Q&A component or some sort of engagement point in that talk. Also, they're right in front of us, and that helps a lot. But looking at how and where they're listening will help you define some of this length, and also thinking about what do they actually need to know. Because what I find is for folks who end up, especially with solo shows that are longer than 30 minutes, there are too many ands. So we talked about this when I was talking about the 10-minute episodes, right? This one didn't end up being a 10-minute episode because I added some ands. And so if I hit a point where I'm looking at being more than 30 minutes in this episode, I will know I have too many ands. And so, like I said, the bulk of your episodes are likely going to fit in this 15 to 30 minute marker. Sales episodes are probably going to be closer to that 15 minutes because you're just kind of breaking down what it is they need to do next, what the offer is, getting in, getting out. I think my audio sales pages are among some of my shorter episodes because I'm very explicitly explaining a very specific offer to you to start our conversation. You'll get more details when we talk, but I'm giving you enough to know if you want to talk to me or not. On the flip side, today's episode is going to be closer to 30 because we're digging into content that has some nuances, that has some if-thens, if you will, right? And so think about that as you're looking at your own episode length. If you hit that 30-minute mark, does everything here need to be here? Or is this maybe a series? Is this maybe more than one episode? Is this an angle I can sort of attack in a future episode so that I can really refine this to a more actionable, tangible, neat and tidy promise instead of one that requires me to talk at you for 45 minutes? All right? Speaking of 45 minutes, let's talk 45-minute episodes. These are almost always guest episodes because when you've got two people talking, sometimes it goes a little longer, especially when we have two people talking about something really tangible, like their experience in working with you. Case study episodes frequently sit more in this 30 to 45 to an hour even. Now, I will say I really, 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 really recommend keeping episodes under an hour. I have a couple of clients who guest episodes frequently go sort of an hour, hour and 15, and retention is pretty good, but we do lose folks at the end. When we keep it tighter, we've got a better retention. But here's the thing. Sometimes you have an episode that breaks the rules, and that's true of every one of the 3 time zones I just talked about. Sometimes you have an episode that breaks the rules and it just works. And so that's okay. Again, this is why, above all, the rule is, as long as it needs to be, to deliver on your purpose, to make your point. No longer, but also no shorter. If it takes a while, it takes a while. But in most cases I see, under an hour, sitting in that 45 to 60 minutes, that's going to be your sweet spot for your guest episodes. It's going to be a real long time to listen to one person talk, though. You're going to need to really be delivering on a promise for that 45 minutes to make sense as a solo episode. With that said, I have clients who have done 45-minute solo episodes that have had incredible completion rates and worked really well. That's why the above all rule is what the above all rule is. When you have more than one voice, though, and when you're trying to have a nuanced conversation, that's where 45 minutes is going to make sense because people are listening. People are hooked. People are engaged. You're giving them a reason to listen. It's not that long because you were trying to hit some magical marker. Regardless of the time frame, I think the thing that comes up when people ask me this question the most is it really being rooted in this idea that they're going to overstay their welcome or bother the person listening. And I think that's the wrong approach to go into anything with, right? Because it's hard to deliver value from a proving place. It's hard to stand in your expertise when you're questioning whether you're too much. And so regardless of 10 minutes or 15 to 30 or over 45 or 3.5 days, whatever length the episode is, I want you to stand in it confidently. I want you to take up the space, because here's a reminder we all need from time to time. They invited you there. They found your show. They hit play. They continued to listen. You're not invading their space. You didn't like show up at their front door and say like, "Hey, can I tell you about?" They invited you in. They are here voluntarily. Take up the space. Stand in your expertise. Deliver your genius. Deliver your value confidently, regardless of how long it takes. And here's what's funny is when you do that, it ends up taking a lot less time, because you're not trying to prove your value at every second. You're not trying to beg them to let you stay. You are delivering. You are doing what you do best, and that is what converts. So there's not some magical time. There's not some magical length. Like, oh, if my episode is 16 minutes and 43 seconds, that's when people convert. No. It needs to be as long as it needs to be to clearly deliver on the promise of the episode, to understandably make your point. No longer, no shorter. You have to show up confidently in that time and take up that space. This is 701st episode of this show. If I was afraid of taking up space, I wouldn't have made it past 15. I mean, when this show launched, I did a 45-minute solo episode plus an hour to an hour and a half minute guest episode every week. Now, in fairness, it was 2012, 2013, and there were like 4 other podcasters. Okay? I had a lot less competition. But I quickly found that my episodes that did the best were my solo episodes. You know why? Because those are the ones where I was making a very focused and intentional episode. I was taking up space. I wasn't platforming someone else and worried about, making them shine or, not overdoing it. No. I was taking up space and standing in my expertise. And that's why those episodes did well. And that's why I shifted the show to solo episodes. And that's why the episodes are still primarily solo episodes. Because they're my chance to talk to you. They're my chance for you and I to start a conversation that continues on in my DMs, in my email, on calls, whatever. This is our chance for you and I to talk. And I'm going to take up the space because you invited me here. And I want you to take up the space too. And the only way that you do that is if I do that. So let's take up space together. All right? If you would like some support in figuring out how best to make your episodes shine, how best to make your episodes convert, that's the work we do in our podcast production services. That's the work we do with our production clients. We sit in, day out, year after year, literally building shows that are assets, building shows that move listeners into clients. And I would love for your show to be added to the list of shows we work with. And I would love to work with you because guess what? Every single one of our production clients, they work with me. I'm who will do your sales call. I'm who will do every one of your strategy calls. I will be the first person and the last person to touch every episode because it is intentionally built as a partnership. Let's get your show produced. Let's get your show out there and let's get you taking up some space. uncommonlymore.com/podcast production to learn more. And more importantly, to book a time for you and I to talk. All right. I'll see you right back here next week. Bye. Thanks so much for listening to the show. Remember that content consumption does not make changes. So commit to doing something from today's episode. Maybe it's taking action on what we talked about. Maybe it's reaching out to me and learning more about podcast strategy intensives or what podcast production looks like with our team. All of that is over at uncommonlymore.com. And if you haven't yet signed up for the podcast newsroom, I want to remind you that is a great next step. If you're not really sure what comes next, Hang out over there. Get those exclusive private episodes. That's over at podcastnewsroom.com. And the last favor I will ask, because social proof is endlessly important for sure, is to leave a rating or review for the show. If you go to ratethispodcast.com/more, that's the easiest way to do it. But I would love to hear what you thought of the show, what you think of the show, and if the show has been helpful for you. I can't wait to chat with you. So this is just the start of the conversation. Reach out so we can keep it going. Talk soon.